Hello and welcome to our first webinar in our Back to Basics series, Understanding Business Development Lifecycle. I'm Mallory Price and will monitor today's webinar. Joining me is Brad Douglas, President and CEO of Shipley Associates, Eric Gregory, Senior Vice President of Business Winning Services, and Tamara Buckman, Director of Business Development. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into your questions tab in your control panel. I'm here to make sure we get as many questions answered as we can, and we will answer as many as we can. So Brad, we'll turn the time over to you.
All right, and Mallory, one of the first questions usually is, will these slides be shared, right? And
yes, it is.
They will be posted on our website where you can refer back to them, and in fact, we hope you will. We hope you'll refer back to these slides. We've got some that have quite a bit of information, probably too much to actually cover in the webinar, but that you could use referring back to. It's almost kind of like checklists and things. So welcome. Thanks for investing your time with us today. We'll cover this topic. As Mallory said, it's kind of back to school time, and we heard some good commentary at the recent APMP International Conference. That a lot of us that have been in the industry for a while, business development, sometimes we need to think and get back to basics, and that's the point of this webinar. We want to talk about what is a business development life cycle. There is no one right answer when it comes to establishing a business development life cycle for your organization, but these are the things we'd like to cover today. And again, you'll have access to this information posted on our website that you can refer back to. So we want to go through a high-level understanding of the life cycle. We're going to drill into the 7 phases of a typical life cycle, kind of a framework for you. We're going to discuss then, after we go through the life cycle, how to make it work for you, how to tailor it and adapt it to your situation. And then we're going to give you a glimpse into an online business development life cycle that you can reference at your leisure. It's free, it's available through our site, and it just goes through the various phases and gates and things that we'll talk about today. We wanted to dispel one myth. We commonly hear out there in industry that the Shipley 96-step proposal development process is clanky, it's too cumbersome. It's not made for us. And the myth we want to dispel today is there is no 96-step Shipley proposal process. What the 96 steps refers to is a framework that we established years ago based on industry best practice, industry standards of an entire business development life cycle. The proposal part of that life cycle doesn't kick in and engage until phase 4, which is really the 5th phase in the process, because we start at phase 0. So as you'll see, this is not a 96-step business development, proposal process. This is a life cycle. This is how a business, an organization, a nonprofit ought to govern themselves when it comes to looking for, identifying, qualifying, and winning work. So we just wanted to dispel that myth. A few definitions going in, just so that we're all on the same page. Business development. This is how Forbes defines business development. It's the creation of long-term value. I would almost insert the word revenue or some type of financial value for customers, markets, or business relationships. Webster defines life cycle as a progression through a series of differing stages of development. So we put that together. Our definition of business development life cycle is a progression through revenue generating phases with activities or steps focused on meeting strategic objectives. Some of your organizations, your primary objectives are revenue. Some are growth. Some are to enter new markets and penetrate new markets. Whatever your strategic organizational objective is, the business development life cycle needs to align with that. It needs to create phases and activities and steps that you can accomplish going forward. A few more definitions so that, again, we're all on the same terminology and page here. Phases, a series of activities or steps leading to a decision to either advance the opportunity or terminate it. Activities and steps are very specific tasks that require action and accountability. So they are steps that require us to assign those activities to an individual person or a team. A decision gate, as we talk through this webinar today, is a milestone. It's a milestone during a phase where a decision is made to either advance the opportunity, redirect it, or terminate it, stop it. Reviews. When we have identified and qualified an opportunity, a review is a periodic, planned team session that evaluates the quality of our opportunity strategy and our documentation. And we may slip in the term P-win, and many of you are familiar with this. P-win means probability of winning, a measure to assess the likelihood of our winning the contract. Okay, so we got definitions out of the way. This is a very common question when it comes to people understanding a business development life cycle. What is the difference between a decision gate in this life cycle, this phased approach to competing and winning, and reviews? And here you see the difference. A decision gate is a point in the process, the life cycle, where you're going to make a decision. You or your management is going to make a decision on whether or not you're going to invest more resources to pursue this market or this specific opportunity. A review, a color team review, as many of us know it, is a point in time where we review our strategy, or we're going to review our action plan or our documents if we're in the proposal phase. So this is the difference between decision gates and color team reviews as we go about the life cycle. We're going to show you a notional life cycle that some of you are familiar with and talk about these decision gates and these reviews at the various stages of the life cycle. So one caution we want to put out there to everyone is don't get caught up and don't get trapped by the process. Don't make it so cumbersome and so complicated and so complex that we get caught up in that as opposed to what we're really trying to achieve. So to improve performance and to tailor a life cycle to fit your organization, which is what we completely embrace, is we need to streamline repetitive tasks. If there are tasks that need to be repeated at various phases, let's try and streamline some of those. Standardize our approach so we're not reinventing the wheel on every pursuit. We need to enforce policies. If we have specific protocols and policies throughout our life cycle, someone needs to be the enforcer of that. And then we need to provide guidance on management priorities. Where does management stand on each of these pursuits throughout the life cycle? So I know some of you are thinking, oh, we have a very specific situation, a very specific environment, a market that we're dealing in. Well, we'll consider these possibilities. Take this life cycle framework we're going to discuss today and model it, but make it your own. So eliminate phases and gates if that's what it takes to fit your environment. But standardize key decisions, right? Regardless of the size or scope of the pursuit or the market we're competing in, we should be standardizing our approach to decision making. Sometimes we can reduce tasks or combine and consolidate them, and sometimes we can combine reviews. If we're dealing with a very short turnaround, 5 to 7 day task order response on a contract, we don't have time for 4 or 5 reviews necessarily. Let's combine those and let's make them more efficient. So this is something many of you probably are familiar with. This is a framework that Shipley established years ago based on industry best practice and standards. And I know you can't read it, but we're going to show you where you can find it on the website. There are 7 phases built into this life cycle. And again, it is completely up to you and up to us to tailor this to our environment, to make it our own. So what we wanted to do in the webinar today is take time to just walk you through each of these phases and address the key decision gates and the key color team or team reviews that might accompany each of these phases. Again, the point here, make it your own. So here we see phase 0, the first phase in this life cycle. At some point, regardless of the size of our company or organization, we have to determine what market we're in and what markets we're not in and what markets we might want to move into. So this begins very early in your organizational strategy. We need to identify and explore strategic markets, make a conscious decision of where we're going to invest our research money, our market research, create a marketing campaign if we determine to go into a certain market. So this is a blow up of that first part of the life cycle. It hinges on our corporate or organizational strategic plan. So going into this phase, we have to identify and explore strategic market areas, define if there are sub markets that we want to participate in, what's the demand for what it is we're offering, and keep this marketing research constantly churning so that we're aware of competitive pressures, price pressures, and things that might change markets we're involved in. Bottom line, the end result here is we want at the end of this phase, or as we migrate to the next phase, we want to make a decision whether or not to enter this market. Now, this is an iterative phase. This is ongoing. This isn't a start here and stop here phase. We should constantly, as an organization, be evaluating and looking at new and different markets. And here's a way, I'm sure you've seen this before, talk about back to basics. This is business 101, really. Over here on the left, you see this quadrant. In the upper left-hand corner, you see existing markets and existing products. So that quadrant number 1 is probably the safest area for us to be involved in. Over here, you see sector 1. We're offering similar products or services to a similar market. The pursuit indicator is very strong. There's limited risk, and we need here to focus on our competitors. How can we be better and different than competitors? Then you see quadrant 2, similar product or service to new customers. Quadrant 3 is similar customers, but new product or service. We've come up with something new and innovative. Now let's go after a similar market. These are moderate pursuit indicators. And quadrant 4, we say the pursuit indicator there is weak, but what we really mean is there's probably a little bit more risk to it. When we're implementing or proposing or positioning a new product or service to new customers, that presents potential risk and might require a little bit more investment than we're normally used to. So this is all part of that phase 0, that market identification and market segmentation. And as we move through this phase, these are the types of decision gate questions we need to be able to answer. If we can't answer these questions, we need to take a harder look at the markets we're involved in. So I'm going to just pause for a minute, let you look at these questions, but this is a really good checklist for us. Okay, let's talk about the next phase in this life cycle. Phase 1, we call it long-term positioning. This is where we begin to really, if you think of building a home, my son and his wife just built a home last year. You start with the foundation. That's that phase 0. What lot, what land, what do we want to be around? Now you start long-term positioning. This might be equivalent to, laying the pad and the foundation. So we've got to start somewhere. We've got to start positioning our solution long-term. We can't wait until opportunities are coming at us. So we've got to look at data ahead of time. We've got to start implementing the marketing plan, the campaign plan we thought about in the previous phase. The end game here really is to make that point number 12, make an interest decision at this point. So we've made a decision to enter or try to enter a market. We've established a place in this market. We are positioning ourselves, promoting ourselves. We're meeting with prospective customers and partners, and ultimately we need to make that interest decision going forward. And here you see that interest decision gate questions that we ought to be asking. And again, I'll just pause for a minute, but down the left you see we need to assess the opportunity. Is it a good fit for us strategically? Are we positioning ourselves, or can we position ourselves? What's the customer's end game? What's their vision and mission? And who will we be competing against? So these are decision gate questions that we need to be thinking about at this stage. Let's go now to the next phase of a life cycle, which is where we need to start qualifying and evaluating and assessing actual opportunities. So phase 2, the opportunity assessment phase. If we hone in on the activities, the steps required, the accountability required here, we need to start accumulating information and intelligence on potential customers, on potential competitors. We need to start building relationships early. Is there a business fit for these potential opportunities we're identifying, whether they're grants or contracts, single award, multiple award? The end of the day, though, we need to make a decision. Someone needs to decide, are we going to pursue some of these opportunities? Have these met our criteria to advance the opportunity through our pipeline? And can we now assign an opportunity lead or a capture manager to this? So the inputs to this, we've made a decision to start qualifying and assessing opportunities. We're going to build knowledge and intelligence about that opportunity with some basic research, some relationship building, ultimately to make that pursuit decision. That's the decision gate at this phase in the process. A checklist of questions we ought to be asking here. Is there a business case? If you look down the left-hand side, do we know the decision makers? Do we know the evaluators? What are their issues? What are their hot buttons? What are their concerns? What will be our roles and responsibilities as the contractor? Who are the competitors? And how well positioned are we? What is our competitive position? So here's a really good list of decision gate questions at this stage. All right, let's move to the next phase, phase 3. We've identified opportunities, we've pre-qualified or qualified opportunities. Now we're into the capture planning phase, the opportunity planning phase. How are we going to go about winning this? Keep in mind, this all might be condensed. We should have done our homework on the market long ago. We should have started positioning ourselves long ago. Now we're dealing more specifically with qualified opportunities. We might only have 2 weeks. We might only have 30 days. We might only have 60 days to put together a capture plan and a win strategy and create a proposal. But here is where we want to start establishing, if we need a team of people to go win this business, we need to establish the core team. Who's going to help us win this business by building relationships, creating a proposal if that's required, and winning the contract. So develop a capture plan. And one of our future webinars in the Back to Basics series will be specifically around capture and capture planning. Again, these are the key steps at this phase, and the inputs and outputs here. Again, we've made a decision to pursue opportunities. We've reviewed them. We've qualified them. We're implementing our strategies. We now, the decision gate here is make a preliminary bid, no bid decision. That's the decision gate. And again, I want to emphasize capture planning is also an iterative process. It is not a start and stop. We've done it, check the box, and move ahead. We are constantly revisiting our capture strategy, our capture plan. So you see the input is the pursuit decision. We've made a decision to pursue a specific opportunity or set of opportunities. We start building relationships, gathering and analyzing data, developing and implementing strategies, and then ultimately we need approval on our opportunity plan or our capture plan to go forward, to make that bid, no bid decision. If a proposal is going to be required, we now start working and interfacing with the proposal team that's going to help us put together a proposal. So the types of questions we need to ask at this point are about contract schedule, the evaluation process, all of these elements that go into this preliminary bid, no bid decision. And you can see there's a lot of things. We need to make sure before we commit resources, before we advance the process too far, we need to understand all of the answers to all of these questions. You'll notice we've started talking about pricing to win here. What is it going to take us as far as price to win this, and does that present acceptable margins for our business? So I'm going to ask Eric to take a few minutes. Eric has significant experience in a leadership role in facilitating and conducting many of these key decision gates on some large and some smaller opportunities. Eric, would you talk just a little bit about the importance of doing what we call often a black hat or competitive assessment review at this stage of the life cycle?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I think it's really important. Black hats accomplish two things. Number one, they enable us to identify the strengths and weaknesses of our competitors, but they also enable us to identify our own strengths and weaknesses so that we can address them as part of the capture phase. Now, one of the things is that black hats can be conducted in a couple of different ways. One way is to simply have teams of people who represent your competitors and have them fundamentally role play as that competitor to try and take information that's available to them and figure out how they are going to win the deal. What you need to do with the team that's portraying you is to make sure that they also investigate not only how you can win the deal, but how you can lose the deal. These are critical elements in being able to form a competitive environment assessment to really understand what your position is vis-a-vis the customer, as well as your competitors, because you have to factor that into consideration. Now, sometimes smaller organizations think that black hats are too complex to do. Another way you can do this, which accomplishes the same thing but is scaled down slightly, is to have somebody in your organization who's really good at doing competitive analysis to actually create a fictional company that basically synthesizes all the excellent characteristics of your major competitors and then put together a briefing that fundamentally says how that fictional company, which would be the customer's ideal representation of who they would like to win, how they could actually defeat you. So it's very critical at this point to do this, and there's a number of different ways to do it that are very effective. Back to you, Brad.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And to your point, and you emphasize this very well, there's no one right or wrong way to do this. And in fact, we've got a question that just came in that kind of relates to this. Sometimes, unfortunately, but sometimes in the real world, we have to guess. You know, we don't always know exactly who's competing. It's not completely clear to us. The question that came in was about classified opportunities that come in with little or no notice. So the question, we receive RFPs via classified fax with little to no warning or visibility into the competitive landscape. What do you recommend for RFP pre-work and positioning? Well, probably we've already done some pre-positioning to receive that RFP. So we probably established some kind of pre-qualification with that customer to be invited to bid on classified work. So that's step one. And then so we're already into phases 2 and 3. We still need to do heavy qualification. Even though we're invited to bid and it seems to come out of the blue and the customer seems to quote, air quote, want us to bid, we've got to be really careful at qualifying. And if we know our industry, as Eric said, we can probably do some kind of at least a mock competitive assessment, and again, Eric said, someone who's our nightmare competitor, that we would like to compete against the worst. So thanks for that question. I hope that that answered it, and will help you there. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate that. The next phase is where we start thinking, all right, we've got an opportunity. It's qualified. We've been invited to bid, maybe. Maybe a bidders conference is on the schedule, an industry day is on the schedule. There's really no RFP out yet, but now we got a capture plan for a specific pursuit. Now we're thinking about actually planning a potential proposal. And this is where we need to, I will say, almost across the board, as business development professionals, we need to do a better job at. We need to do a better job at pre-planning the proposal before the final solicitation hits, when we can. If they're landing in our lap, if they're classified and they come out with little or no warning, then there's not a whole lot we can do other than some of these things. We can anticipate, hopefully, based on the agency or the government organization that is issuing this classified deal, we can anticipate this. So we can start thinking about a work breakdown structure. We can start thinking about, are we possibly going to need a teaming partner on this opportunity? What will be our win strategy, our proposal strategy on this? We can start thinking about costs, cost to us, and pricing. So proposal planning is a key step, and some people will say, well, why do you break that out as a separate phase in a business development life cycle? Well, it's because we believe in it. We believe that waiting until a solicitation lands in our lap and starting the proposal then is not responsible and is not best practice. So we have broken out in this framework we're sharing with you the idea that we do a formal pre-proposal planning stage, planning phase. And here you see the steps in that and the potential outcome, right? Embedded in this proposal planning, there is a pink team review. Not all companies call it that. You might call it an opportunity review number 1, where we're looking at some of the storyboards and mock-ups. But what we're trying to accomplish here in the proposal planning, we've made a preliminary decision to bid, right? We now are taking information from the opportunity plan, the sales lead, the capture manager. We're refining our solution. We're starting to think about price to win at this point even more closely. Our goal in this phase of the life cycle, can we validate our preliminary bid decision? Are we still on track? Do we need to redirect? And there's a critical review that happens here, and I'm going to ask Tamara to speak to that in just a minute. But the bid validation decision gate, here are some questions we need to be thinking about. If there's a draft RFP out, have we taken a good look at that? The final RFP. Are the terms and conditions and requirements as we expected them? The solution. Can we really answer the mail here? Do we need a teaming partner? If so, if we haven't done so already, we're behind. Our proposal readiness, and you see a series of questions there that we need to be asking ourselves. And then other issues that come up. So we're in this proposal phase now, proposal activity. And Tamara, I know you've been a proposal manager for a long time on a lot of different types of pursuits. Would you spend a few minutes talking about not the decision gate now, but the review, what often is called a pink team review at this stage in the life cycle?
Yes, thank you, Brad. As you stated, color reviews are certainly a critical step in improving the quality of the documentation, but also the proposal evaluation score. And typically, the pink team draft is usually a rough draft, whether you have one review or two reviews. This is a rough draft of the storyboards, mock-ups, draft writing plans, or even the annotated outline, whatever your organization may call it. That can usually be anywhere from about 60 to 70% complete. And the goal of this pink team review is to provide that independent assessment that determines the structured outline complies with the request for proposal document or requirements. This validates that the proposal approaches are consistent and aligns with the capture strategies that have been developed over time, and gives reviewers an opportunity to provide recommendations for improvements where needed. Again, back to that validation. And it also is used to confirm the proposed messaging is prevalent throughout each of the sections. This review isn't intended to be anything about grammar, edits, spelling errors, inconsistent voice, etc. It's really designed to be focused on the content and the messaging. You can, based on what Brad showed the last slide, other questions that could be considered are the customer's hot buttons identified and addressed? Are our win themes developed and easily identifiable? Does the outline section allow for the proposed technical or management strategy to clearly be consistent, concise, and articulate, and in a compelling manner? And does the draft narrative content and graphics support the proposed approach? In addition to planning and preparation, there's also an opportunity for the review to help identify potentially harmful resourcing gaps. The proposal may not be adequately staffed with subject matter expertise that have the experience and intimate knowledge of the program or the customer, or in some cases, the proposed solution. There may be limited resources who have multiple writing assignments that could adversely affect the quality of the content. Having this review affords the capture and proposal team an opportunity to work to identify potential fixes with either other internal organizations or their partners. So all of these items are critical to discover and resolve during this pink team review phase before moving into red draft development, spending more and additional B&P money, but also developing strategies that are not consistent with your capture strategy or in line with your customers' expectations. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Tamara. A follow-up question for you, Tamara. If your time frame is condensed, in other words, you know, you've only got, I'm going to exaggerate, 7 to 10 days to respond, can you modify a pink team and still make it effective?
Absolutely. You indicated the very beginning about combining reviews. A pink team can be very condensed in some cases. It's just a matter of establishing expectations and narrowing and focusing on specific objectives and outputs for that review. Typically, a routine or normal color reviews tend to be, start in the morning, end in the evening. If you only have 7 days in your schedule, you're probably only going to have a few hours to complete a pink team review. So structuring a review that meets your expectations and establishing that up front minimizes a full-fledged, for lack of a better word, problem on your hands. So minimizing the effort involved in the review, but also establishing expectations can certainly yield a good review.
Great. So thank you. So we shouldn't let this life cycle we're talking about in this webinar scare us off if we're dealing with smaller dollar, more condensed timeframes. The point is we need a discipline all the way through. We can't be bidding on every single opportunity that comes in our door and expect to have an efficient business. So thanks for answering that, Tamara. I'm going to backtrack a little bit because we got a question from one of our participants. It says, we have a good process to, and Eric, you may jump in here too. We have a good process to pre-qualify, but we have difficulty with the government slipping opportunities to the right, meaning delaying them, and it causes a bad choice. Do we let things go, that are less qualified opportunities, I assume the question means, or do we fill in the space while we're waiting for the more strategic opportunities with less qualified opportunities? What do you suggest? So I think the question is saying, if the government has slipped an opportunity by 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, and they've delayed it, should we go ahead maybe and bid on less qualified opportunities in the interim while we're waiting for the bigger deals to hit? That's how I'm interpreting this question. My response is yes. Might your overall P-win drop? Of course it might. But if you've got people sitting on the bench, if you've got people on your payroll that are responsible for generating revenue, I would rather have them working on less qualified opportunities than either letting them go or letting them maybe sit somewhat idle. Eric, I don't know if you feel the same way. Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. You should always have your pipeline divided up into A, B, and C deals. A are the ones that you really want to bid, and if they slip, then you begin looking at your B opportunities to move one up to take the place, because you have to have an award pipeline of things that are going to be awarded in the future in order to be able to predict, what your future revenue is going to be. So you've got to be able to plan for that. And then if you even have a B deal that slips, that's when you take a look then at maybe you move a C deal up, maybe even to potentially into an A slot, because that's what you have to do to fill the gap. The key is that this has to be planned. This cannot just be random activity in the course of a fiscal year where you're basically saying, I'll wait and see what happens. It has to be planned out so that you have some idea of what you can and will do when these slips occur. That's what efficient and effective organizations do.
That is a great point, and that's where pipeline / lifecycle management really comes into play. Thanks, Eric. That's very helpful. The idea of tiering and categorizing, prioritizing these opportunities so that we don't lose momentum. We had another question. I'll address it because it has to do with what Tamara talked about here, pink team. How soon after RFP is released should you hold a pink team with a 45-day response? I'm going to give I'm going to give kind of a benchmark, if you will, and that is, I kind of think of it as about at the 25% mark. So if you've got 45 days to respond, no later than, say, 10 days into that, you ought to be doing a pink team. And you might have more than one pink team. You might have a pre-pink team and a pink team, or a pink team 1 and a pink team 2. But I kind of use the rule of thumb of about 20–25% into it, you ought to be having a pretty solid pink team, and maybe you've already held a preliminary. I don't know, Tamara, if you wanted to comment on that.
Yes, Brad, I actually agree with your assessment. About 10 days in is pretty common, and I would have pink team 1, and that would be focused on storyboards and mock-ups, and using our Shipley 4-box method. And then I would have a pink team 2 roughly 7 to 10 days later, and that would be more of a fleshed out, annotated outline, taking into consideration the recommendation and guidance we received from the initial pink team. But my strategy would always be to have 2 pink teams and 1 red team, and then move into the final phases. But certainly, you know, like Brad said, within the first 25% of the schedule, you definitely want to have some sort of hard stop milestone evaluation to validate the proposal strategy before moving too far into the schedule that you're unable to set a recourse for reparations.
Yeah, great point. And then there was a comment just to follow on that you know, depending on our organization, revenue streams, if that's the most important measure for our success, then the percentage of wins really becomes secondary. And so this gets to Eric's point. We need to prioritize these opportunities based on our organizational strategy. It's not always the highest dollar programs that matter the most. Some smaller dollar programs are worth much more strategically to us than the higher dollar amount. So, you know, we've got to factor in profit margin and strategic positioning, long-term positioning, where we're going for future, and all of that. So that was a great comment and a great point. Let's move to the next phase of actual proposal development. And here you see the activities that we ought to be involved in at this phase. And you see here, we show what we actually just talked about, that, you know, somewhere along the line here, the RFP's been released, the solicitation's out, and there might be that second pink team review, you know, that we talked about. So during the proposal development phase, obviously a solicitation of some sort is out there. We've either found it or it's been sent to us. There's a release of the solicitation, the RFP, the tender. We now need to start very carefully planning, making very clear assignments on the proposal itself. There needs to be, if it's strategic, a proposal manager. It might be the sales lead. You know, in business to business life cycle, you know, it's the salesperson that often manages that proposal, him or herself. And then we need to prepare a persuasive sales document, a proposal that really commits and clarifies our message. And at the end of this phase, again, this is phase 5, so this is the next to last phase in the life cycle. Our point here is we've got to decide, are we submitting this or not? Are we really, if we win it, are we ready to go? And these are the types of questions we need to be asking at this point. This is the proposal submittal decision gate questions. Is our proposal compliant, responsive, competitive, priced to win? Does it meet our standards? Have we assessed risk? Are there any unresolved areas of risks that we haven't considered before we hit that submit button? Are we ready to negotiate? Are there some constraints we ought to be thinking about? Who's going to negotiate if we're given the award or notice of award? Is our project or program manager ready to roll immediately upon award? So these are those final questions before submittal that we need to be thinking about. And prior to that also, we should have by now done a very comprehensive color team review, a red team review. And Tamara, would you just take a few minutes and talk about kind of the inputs, outputs, and objectives of a good red team review?
Sure. The red team draft should have certainly implemented the improvement recommendations and strategies from the pink team review or reviews. This draft is usually more of a complete document, with it being roughly somewhere between 80 and 90% complete. This version, although it's not completed 100%, it should have near to or final graphics, tables, call-out boxes, statistical data, reference points, and narrative that is in a consistent and standard format without having gone through a formal desktop publishing process. Hopefully for the review purposes, you'll be able to have the same reviewers as you did for the pink team review in order to achieve consistency in the guidance and recommendation received for recovery purposes. Although, unfortunately, I understand that's usually not possible or always possible, so it's best to combine recommendations with other reviewers in an effort to avoid or minimize receiving conflicting guidance and recommendations. This review typically will imitate the customer's evaluation process or their source selection review, and some red teams formally score the proposal in accordance with the solicitation's evaluation factors or rating system. There is heavy emphasis on validating the compliance of the requirements stated in the RP, followed by the responsiveness and the clarity of the proposal response. Typically, I've seen questions that we would consider during this review to include, obviously, is the proposal response compliant with the requirements? But do we have a compelling and convincing solution that mirrors the customer's hot buttons? Does the proposal show value and provide substantiation to be considered technically acceptable or superior? Does the proposal provide features and benefits of the solution that would resonate? Does the proposal convey confidence in our ability to perform the stated requirements with little to no risk? Does the technical solution align with the proposed price? And does the technical solution justify the price? Although the price may be reviewed separately, the price and technical solution should be reviewed together to avoid submitting a proposal that is potentially too expensive, with a solution, that is too expensive. So ultimately, the red team review is a final opportunity for reviewers to provide recommendations on how to correct any deficiencies and to improve the quality of the proposal document and ultimately the probability of win. Thanks, Brad.
Good. And ultimately, and you hinted at this leads to one usually final approval from an executive team or an executive leader. Eric, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Have you ever gotten to this final approval stage and had the thing kiboshed?
Not very often. It does happen. I've gotten, before, not really at the red team, but close to red team and have had to see a deal killed. And you don't want to do that because it's an absolute waste of time, energy, and money. But on the other hand, if you know you have one that's not going to win, you're better cutting your losses at any point. It can be very embarrassing if you submit a proposal that is in bad shape at red team, and then you get a letter from a client that basically says, "I don't really understand why you bid this." And that happened on a proposal that I worked on one time early in my career that I thought we should no bid. And believe me, that sharpened my interest in making effective no bid decisions early.
Yeah, good. Yeah. I completely agree. You know, it should be few and far between when we get to this stage where it's an absolute final sign off and we pull the plug. But if we shortchange some of this life cycle that we're talking about, if we ignore some of the discipline, you're right, it can happen. And if Eric, you said this, one easy, quick way to tarnish our brand and our reputation is to submit a proposal that is absolutely off the mark, non-compliant, and clearly missed the mark. So just we wanted to put this in here because it is important to think about and spend time on this final approval. The last phase in the life cycle, this framework we're presenting, and again, this needs to be tailored, this needs to be adapted to your situation, but there's a final phase, what takes place post-submittal. We've either delivered the proposal, we've sent it in, we've submitted it online through a bidding system or whatever. Now what activities should we be involved in? Well, there's a lot. In fact, some of the most important activities happen post-submittal. So we submit, we then need to keep in contact with the customer without bothering them and irritating them. We need to be on guard and ready for negotiation and for discussions. If there's evaluation notices we need to respond to, we need to be ready, and we need to make sure how we're responding to those correlates with what we said in the proposal. We can't come out of left field or right field with our responses on that. And then ultimately the notice of award and the work begins. So let me just re-emphasize, this is an iterative process. A business development life cycle doesn't turn on and doesn't turn off with each opportunity. It's a life cycle. Within that life cycle, there are specific pursuits. There are specific opportunities to win business and to generate revenue. But it all has to be in the context of this overall life cycle. So once we've submitted, we've made that final offer, and you alluded to some of this, Tamara, we need to make sure we've answered these types of questions. You know, are the contract terms we're agreeing to what we expected? Can we perform? Those types of questions. And finally, again, emphasizing the iterative nature of this life cycle, lessons learned. We need to go back and document and make accessible and retrievable what lessons did we learn on this particular pursuit? How can we better qualify? Could we have better qualified? What about the proposal process? Was it clanky? Was there a lot of rework and redundancy? So we can actually learn. The problem we see out there in industry is not necessarily we're not doing lessons learned, it's we're not learning from lessons. We do a lessons learned review, we document it, we put it up on our SharePoint or any other site, and we forget or we ignore and don't go back and actually learn those lessons and apply those lessons on the next deal. A couple of questions, and then we need to wrap up, and thank you for your questions. Someone asked the questions, do you have a separate one voice edit or other milestones for tech editors? As part of your red team, someone needs to do the horizontal review, and this is where the one voice edit comes in. So this is a great question, and we really didn't get into specifics on how to execute effective color team reviews, but absolutely yes. In the red team, someone needs to do a horizontal review. By that, I mean section by section, volume by volume, the complete proposal for a one voice edit. And that needs to be part of the what I would consider red team. There's a question, how do you decide how many people to provide a review, the size of the company, proposal, SME? You want to keep the team as concise as you can. while still having an unbiased cross-section. So you need representation from the technical team. You need representation from legal and contracts. You need people who have participated in the solution, who understand the win strategy, and then those who are a little removed from it. So I know that's a vague answer, and it really does vary, but boy, you don't want to overdo or overstaff a color team. It can really bog you down. So let's kind of wrap up with some best practices in summary of the speedy life cycle discussion, the back to basics. There are certain constants we need to address. You know, we need that discipline. We need standardized decision gates, whether it's a long-term pursuit or something that landed in our lap and we've only got 30 days to respond to. Formal color team reviews. Tamara walked us through many of those. So decision gates, color team reviews, make them your own. The variables, the number of phases, number of gates, the type of solicitation it is. And then factors, you know, how much time do we have? Resources, the number of people. That last bullet in the right-hand side there, factors, is commitment. Do we have our leadership's commitment, our executives' commitment to invest in winning this deal? Sometimes that's the biggest hurdle, is getting that commitment. So we want you to make the life cycle work for you. To do that, you have to make it your own. You have to tailor it up or down, scale it up or down, and really make it work in your particular environment. A key point here is point number 3, clear roles and responsibilities. What we see way too often in industry is that people really don't understand what they're supposed to be doing and what their action items are, and they're not being held accountable. So I want to just show you here, we're showing you a link to a little interactive tool on our website. Let me click into this. So this basic framework we've talked about, this life cycle, is online. It's available to any of you. You can just scroll across. You can see the phases we've talked about here. You can see each one of those activities, each one of those tasks. You can see the key milestones, the key decision gates and reviews we talked about here up above. So this is something you can reference back to. If you need to educate your team on what a BD life cycle is, what's involved, this is available for you. And again, you need to make sure people understand this is scalable. It's something that you can adapt to and make your own. So we've made that available. This is the link to it. It'll be posted on our site with the slides and the slide deck. So again, this has been a great discussion. Eric and Tamara, thank you so much for your contributions. There are some questions I'm sorry we didn't get to. We got to most of them. The gold team versus the white glove, they are very, very similar, by the way. Someone asked about the difference there, gold team, white glove. White glove is a combination of the gold team and a final edit. So thanks for that question. Eric, Tamara, thank you. We'll let you all go, and thanks for participating. If we can answer questions, here are email addresses. Feel free to reach out to any one of us. Mallory, thanks for moderating this and handling all the details. Have a great day, everybody.